It is good to be with you this morning, and it is good to be back. I appreciate those, Seth and Nathan, willing to take over while I'm away, and also Ron. He has been known to do that as well, and so that we can continue things seamlessly and as we ought. Now, as was just read for us in 1 Samuel chapter 28, we have Samuel speaking to Saul. But this is a peculiar instance. This isn't your typical instance, because Samuel has been dead for a while. But as Samuel says in verse 15, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Samuel is going to say, verse 16, "So why do you ask me?" Saul had a problem. He had several problems. But there was a large Philistine army amassing, ready to go to battle against him. And he had been trying to inquire of God, and there was nothing but silence. God had departed Saul. He was no longer giving him information as one could have expected. But he had departed Saul. But God is going to bring this about to where Samuel is going to be speaking to Saul and letting Saul know what is about to occur. And really, he is telling Saul, this is your last 24 hours. Tomorrow, you and your sons are going to be with me. They're going to be with me. These are your final hours on this earth. And Saul did have time to make correction. Saul had a lifetime to make correction. But before we come to this, let's discuss exactly what brought us to this point, or what brought Saul to this point. In 1 Samuel chapter 9, we see where Saul is rightfully declared king. He is anointed king, God using Samuel to do it. God has chosen Saul from Benjamin, that is the tribe of Benjamin. He has been chosen as God, chosen by God to be king. Now, they hadn't had a king until this point. They had had judges, and of course they had leaders such as Joshua and Moses before him, but none of them were kings. There was an attempt in the book of Judges to make a man king, but he wasn't really king of anything, or much of anything. He definitely was not the king of Israel. They tried to make him king, but it all failed. But now in this time of Samuel, when Samuel is prophet, you have men coming to Samuel and saying that your sons are incredibly wicked, therefore we need a king, which those two things don't connect at all. That doesn't connect logically. Just because his sons are wicked does not mean, oh, and therefore we need a king. They wanted a king. They wanted a king like the nations around them. They wanted a king who was going to look impressive, a king that they could give him finery. They could show themselves like the Gentile nations around them. And here, God allows them to have a king, but he's going to choose the king, and it is Saul, in fact. And Saul, for a little while, once he is convinced that, yeah, you are king, because he didn't want to be king, once he is convinced, yeah, you are king, Saul does do some things. There are certain things about Saul that he will do. Not everything about him is wicked. Not everything. And to begin with, it looks like he's going to be okay. He's going to be fine. Now, some things that Saul would do. Saul would go to war against the enemies of Israel. He would do that. And Saul is a man he's a man of valor in that respect. That, yeah, he would go and defend the borders of Israel. And he did do that. But if we go to 1 Samuel chapter 13, we see where Saul makes a mistake. It is a blunder. It is a terrible blunder, and one that he could have known, and I would say definitely knew he could not do. But he's going to do it anyway. Okay, so we have Saul. Let's just begin in verse 1. Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash in the mountains of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the people he sent away every man to his tent. And Jonathan attacked the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." Now all Israel heard it said that Saul had attacked the garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel had also become an abomination to the Philistines. And the people were called together to Saul at Gilgal. When the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came up and encamped in Michmash to the east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, for the people were distressed, and the people hid in caves, in thickets, in rocks, in holes, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilgal. As for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Then he waited 7 days according to the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Saul said, "Bring a burnt offering and peace offering here to me." And he offered the burnt offering. He was to wait 7 days for Samuel. Samuel is delayed for whatever reason. I am guessing that Samuel is delayed by God as a test for Saul, because Saul is getting desperate. What's he going to do? Is he going to follow the will of God, or is he going to follow the will of Saul? What is he going to do? And here is where Saul shows he's only been king for 2 years now. Only been king for 2 years. And here he's got to go up against the Philistines. Things have been going pretty good up until this point. He's got to go up against the Philistines. The people are absolutely frightened by the massive army that they are seeing. And Saul doesn't seem to be able to keep them united together so that they can go as a, and I'm talking about his men, as an army to go and fight them. But Samuel is delayed. So what does that mean? That means that you wait on Samuel, is what it means. But he gets desperate. And what he does is his own solution. It isn't God's solution, it's his own solution. Bring here. What does he say? Bring a burnt offering and a peace offering here to me. And he offered the burnt offering. Now it happened as soon as he had finished presenting the burnt offering that Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him that he might greet him. And this is the thing with Saul. Saul at least acts like, and I don't know how oblivious Saul may have been, but Saul just did something he could not rightfully do. Saul is from what tribe? Benjamin. Even if Saul had been from Levi, the tribe of Levi, that doesn't necessarily mean he can do this, because there were plenty of Levites who were not priests. There are plenty of them who were not priests. He's not even a Levite. He's from Benjamin. He can't do this. Did he already have information to show him he had no right to do this? Yeah, it's called the Law of Moses. It's those first 5 books that you would go to. And actually, you could begin at Exodus, but don't stop at it. Now, Genesis wouldn't give him the law of Moses, but Exodus sure does. And then go from there into understanding you can't do this. You can't do this at all. Nevertheless, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. And this is where God comes to the point of saying, okay, this king will not do what I've called him to do. He's not going to do it. If we go now to chapter 15, we see where God tells Saul to go against the Amalekites, and he is to utterly destroy them. And he is to destroy everyone among the Amalekites. And he's also to destroy all of their livestock. That's what he's called to do. And this is where details matter. Here he's been given, in that first instance, in chapter 13, Saul isn't told that he himself is to make the sacrifice, and he just misses out some details. Saul just decides he's going to do it. And it doesn't matter what details he incorporated. There was one massive detail he completely ignored, and that was the fact that he's not a priest of Jehovah, and he can't do that. Even a king cannot do that. Yes, a king is under the law of God. Yes. Now, here in chapter 15, he is told what he is supposed to do. Now, from his standpoint, he thinks he's done it. From his standpoint, he thinks he's done it. But that's only because Saul is listening to Saul and not to God. When he's told to utterly destroy the Amalekites, that means none of them are to be alive. That doesn't mean to weaken them so much that they can never rise again, or make it to where, yet there's only one man left. That seems like utterly destroying to me. But what does God tell him to do? That there's to be no one of the Amalekites is to be left. He spares Agag the king. He spares just the king. And from a perspective of this world, he's a king of nothing now. What can Agag do now? Well, as far as raising an army, he has no army. As far as a people, though the Amalekites might have been mighty at one time, they're not mighty anymore. They're gone, but he still remains. And here is neglecting the details, in that he doesn't kill all of them. He lets the king live. Aside from that, he is told to slaughter. Yes, they are to kill all the livestock, but they save the best of the livestock. Later, he says to Samuel that they've done that to offer up a sacrifice to God. But did God ask him, tell him, command him to do that? No. He didn't tell him to do that at all. It doesn't matter how good of an idea you may think it is. That's not what God called you to do. That's not what God called you to do. Do what he told you to do. But Saul doesn't. He does not listen to God. And his heart is not with God at all. And, especially in chapter 13, when he decides he's going to make the sacrifice himself, no telling how many of his men would have seen that thinking, is this right? This can't be right. This is not right. Now, he's the king. You're not going to stop him. This is the king. And now, while those around him, other than Samuel, might not have known what they were called to do, what Saul was called to do, Saul is the one he's the king. He's in control. This is a test of him, not of anybody else. It's a test of him. Will he do the will of God? And the answer to that is no. Now, here in this, we see verse 23. So 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 23. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness as the iniquity of idolatry. So God is calling him rebellious and stubborn as iniquity of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you from being king. That's one thing he knows. God has rejected him from being king. Now he's going to live the rest of his life being king. But he knows that while he would want the kingdom to go to Jonathan, or at least to one of his sons, but to Jonathan, that's not what's going to happen. It's actually going to be going to a neighbor of his. Well, it's going to be David, a generation younger than Saul. And here we come to chapter 17. Chapter 17, David proves himself to be a worthy as far as being obedient to God and showing extraordinary courage that Saul didn't have. And you may say, well, you just said that Saul was a valiant man. Yes, he was. But when it came to Goliath, nobody was going out there. No one was taking up Goliath's challenge. Nobody. But David did, and David is able to stand before Goliath on the battlefield. Now, granted at a distance, because he's a big man, and he's got a big spear, and he can kill you from a distance. And it probably is a surprising distance too. But he tells him the battle it belongs to the Lord. The battle belongs to Jehovah. That's who the battle belongs to. And that he's going to take Goliath's head, and there's a large body there, 9'9" of it, that's going to be food for the birds. That's what he's going to become. And that's what occurs. Precisely what occurs. And that battle doesn't last long at all. It's pretty quick. It's so quick, I have a feeling that both sides wondered what just happened. And it isn't until you have David lifting up Goliath's head that you realize, oh yeah, well, this is finished. This is done. But there's the future king right there. And from this, you have the glory of that moment being expressed by women when they sing a song that hasn't been sung before. They sing a song, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Verse 8, then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him, and he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day forward. Here is his hero beyond all the others. No one else in the army, no one else among his people did this, just David. And what else can he have but the kingdom? Well, he already knows the kingdom's being taken away from him. He already knows that. And now he sees this one who suddenly goes from being unknown to where the center of this song. But it's understand what the women were expressing in here is the might of Israel and the might of God. It's not just that David is better than Saul. That's not what they were saying. That's not what they were saying, but that's the way he took it. And this song wasn't just one that Saul heard or that Israel heard. The Philistines are able to repeat that song. They've heard that song, and they're able to repeat it when they're discussing David. They discovered, isn't he the David who's killed his 10,000s? They discuss that song. But we continue on. In all of this, we see where Saul now has David. Now, of course, David's got to be part of this. But Saul is going to use his daughter, gives his daughter in marriage to David. And he does it to be a snare to him. That's precisely what he wants his daughter to be a snare to him. And that is using that's using his own daughter for a political means. Using his daughter to get at someone he does not like. Well, what kind of person is that? Not too good. Now, we see where he wanted to pin David to the wall with the spear. But David is smart enough, sees what's happening, and he's able to escape. But Saul becomes such a madman that later on, while he would want the kingdom to go to his son Jonathan, he had a moment of anger that he wanted to do the same thing to Jonathan, that is, pin him to the wall, and he tried. He had a spear then as well and would have killed his own son that he wanted on the throne after himself. Well, so much for that idea. Because of his anger at his own son, who was defending David, that he would kill him too. But Saul goes beyond that to where he goes hunting David, and he will kill anyone who helps David, and he does. He begins killing priests. And he kills an entire city of priests, of Levites, I should say, because this is more than just priests. This would be women and children and all. He is murdering a city of Israel that he is supposed to be defending. This is a madman. This is a madman. And notice, we start from chapter 13 of this terrible blunder that he begins, of just knowing because he would have known what the laws were concerning the Levites and sacrifices, and he's willing to dismiss that for a moment of desperation. He's willing to dismiss that. What else is he willing to dismiss? And we come to this point of him being so angry at David, who is just a better man than himself. All right, just a better man than himself, and a hero of Israel, and he wants him dead and willing to murder his Jonathan to do it. Now, we come down to, let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 28. And we come to this point, these last hours in Saul's life. Saul has been going further and further away from God, so that when it's pointed out, these are your final, this is the final hours of your life, that he's too deeply entrenched in sin. He's too deeply entrenched to where he cannot make a decision, a wise decision of getting himself right with God at that point, which he could have done. If he wanted to do that, he could have done. But he left God a long time ago. He left him a long time ago. God had not been in his thoughts except when he's in trouble. Now, we come to verse 3. So Samuel chapter 28, verse 3. Now Samuel had died. Now Samuel died a few chapters before this. Samuel's been dead. But this is just letting us know again, remember, Samuel has died. And here's another thing concerning, and it's a reminder also of what Saul has been doing. And Saul has not done everything wicked. He's not been doing everything wicked. There's some things that are admirable about Saul. He's a warrior, yes. A warrior king, yeah, he's been doing that. But also he's been ridding the land of spiritists and mediums and the like. Well, what are those? Well, those would be your fortune tellers. Those would be those that pretend to speak to the dead, or they pretend to know the future, or the ones that may, like today, read your palm or read tea leaves or something like that. That they are able to tell the future or even do witchcraft sort of things. All right? He's rid the land of them. Now, he's gotten rid of everybody, but it has been his law. That is why back in chapter 15, it is stated there by Samuel, it's from God, the rebellion of sin, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Well, he's showing him, you've been getting rid of those practicing witchcraft, but the sin of rebellion is just as bad. The sin of rebellion, which you just did, is just as bad as that. Now, so we're back at 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 3. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah in his own city, and Saul had put the mediums and the spiritists out of the land. He's ridding the land of them. They have no place. Now, I want you to understand now that spiritists and mediums in that day are the same as they are today. The same. They can do nothing. Nothing at all. Whether it's with tarot cards, or whether it's with a Ouija board, or whether it's with a crystal ball, or whether it's reading your palm, they can do nothing. Don't think that those of the ancient past had any power whatsoever. They didn't. They could have a power of influencing people, fooling people. Yeah, they could do that. But they had no power to do what they said they could do. And there's no doubt that some of them thought that they could. I don't doubt that. They could have fooled themselves into thinking that they could get it right. So he's gotten rid of these. So that's something that he's done right. Verse 4, then the Philistines gathered together and came and encamped at Shunem. So Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. How did the Philistines get this size of an army? Where did they even come from? This is huge. This is huge. And when Saul inquired, look at this. Suddenly, Saul is inquiring of the Lord. Suddenly. Well, where was that in chapter 13? Where was that in chapter 15? Where was that in chapter 18? Where was that when he is chasing down David? Where is that when he says, because he knows these things, where is that when he says, I have played the fool? He knows he's played the fool. He knows he's played the fool. But look at this. Then verse 6. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Nothing. There is nothing there. Now he desperately wants to hear from God because things look dire. And he's going to do the same thing that he's been doing. Ignore all that and try something else. Ignore all that and do something that he figures, well, I'm desperate, I've got to do something. So in my desperation, I'm going to yet break my own laws. And not just his laws, they're the laws of God as well. He's going to seek a medium, someone to raise up Samuel specifically, which I find to be a curious thing. But let's continue on. Then Saul said to his servants, verse 7, find me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her And his servant said to him, in fact, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. So Saul disguised himself and put on other clothes, and he went, and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, please conduct a seance for me, and bring up for me the one I shall name to you. Then the woman said to him, look, I know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the spiritists from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for my life to cause me to die? And Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. He swears by the name of Jehovah that, you won't be punished for this. You won't be punished. Then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel for me, which is to me curious. Samuel? How many times when Samuel was alive did Saul go to find Samuel to ask him much of anything? How many times did he do it? How many times did he go to Samuel to say, should I be after David or not? How many times did he do that? He didn't. Samuel would come to him and tell him something. But he didn't go to seek Samuel for decisions like this. Now that he's in desperate times, and God is not speaking to him, now suddenly he wants Samuel. Well, Samuel happens to be dead, you know. Well, yeah, but he's going to a medium because he thinks the medium can do it. The medium, the spiritist, can do this? Why have you been casting them out? Why have you been casting them out? And now you're going over there as though you never cast them out, as though you never were against them. Now you're using them. And what you're saying is that you should never have cast them out, is what you're saying. Bring up Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, so it doesn't take long. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman spoke to Saul, saying, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. All right. No one is more surprised at the presence of Samuel than that woman. All right? If this was just another working day for her, Samuel, no problem. There he is. Okay. Who else do you want? If this was just another working day for her, this is nothing. Would you like to talk to Melchizedek? Let's bring him in. Would you like to talk? How about Moses? Let's bring him in. Why not? No one is more surprised than her. Why? Because she never experienced this before. All she ever did was hokum. We will just call it that. All she ever did was nonsense. It's like we see today. It's just nonsense. They have no power whatsoever. And I have had it. I know. Because it's been my experience that every now and then you can come across not only a member that, just a regular member of the church who may think, yes, she had the power to do this. How did she have the power to do this? Power can only come from God. Power didn't come from Samuel. Power didn't come from Satan. Satan can't do this. It had to come from God. It's not by her power that this was done. It's by the power of God, because Saul is going to tell the truth on this matter. Samuel, who has died, is going to tell the truth. He is now continuing to prophesy. And yes, I once had a teacher. He was in fact a preacher, and he was quite certain that Satan had given her this power. Well, no, Satan has never had that power. Satan can't do that. And why would Satan bring up the prophet Samuel to tell the truth about anything? That's not what Satan would want to do. Maybe someone else who's not Samuel would tell a lie, but that's not Satan doesn't have that power at all. It's God who did this. Verse 13, and the king said to her, do not be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I saw a spirit ascending out of the earth. So he said to her, what is his form? And She said, "An old man is coming up, and he is covered with a mantle." And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed down. Now Samuel said to Saul, Samuel says this, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Saul answered, "I am deeply distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me and does not answer me anymore, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called you, that you may reveal to me what I should do." That is interesting, because he's never said that while Samuel was alive. He never said that. He never gave that. This is Saul in a desperate hour. And notice what he knows, and he's known it for a while. God has departed from me. He knows that. Let's discuss just some things that Saul knows. Saul knows the kingdom's going to be taken away from him by God. He knows that God anointed him king, but he also knows God's going to take it away. He also knows it's David that's going to be given. He's the next king. He also knows David is a more righteous man than himself. He knows that. He knows that the things that he has done in the past, and he knows he has played the fool. He is able to express that honestly on occasion, at least 2 times. He's able to say that you are more righteous than myself. You are more merciful than me. And I have played the fool. He can say those things. He knows this. He knows this. And let's just look at this logically, because Saul has broken so many things, playing the hypocrite. And if God has departed from him, why would God send a message through Samuel that's going to be any different? Why would Samuel have a different message here? Now, I'm going to say this. Samuel is going to tell Saul what's about to happen. So Saul now knows what's going to happen, but it doesn't change his course. He is so deeply entrenched in his own interests, in himself, and in sin, that he will not change. We have a saying, there's no fool like an old fool. Why would that be? Well, if a fool manages to survive until they're old, if they haven't changed, they're just getting worse and worse. They're getting just deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's harder for them to see the light. It's harder for them to get out of that, because they've just gone so far. And that's precise. And Saul's just going to continue to do what he's always done. Then Samuel said, "So why do you ask me, seeing the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy?" Why are you coming to me? Why are you coming to me? I was a prophet of God here on the earth. Now he's going to be a prophet of God again, but not on this earth. He's a prophet again, prophesying this one last time to tell Saul what's about to happen. And here it is. You are only hours away from death. Now that's pretty merciful if you ask me. That's rather merciful that God could tell him what's about to take place. But as we read from Romans chapter 2, all that can be despised, despising the goodness, the forbearance, the long-suffering of God, which is what Saul is doing. He despises, and he goes to all this trouble to bring Samuel in to talk to him, to ignore him, because that's what he's going to do. God is your enemy. What you going to do about that? God's your enemy. You might want to make a correction. Verse 17, "And the Lord has done for himself as he spoke by me." Samuel could say, "I've already told you this. I told you this a long time ago. You were there. I was there. God spoke through me. This is what you already knew. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David." You know, Saul already knew this. There's not a single thing Samuel has said yet that Saul didn't already know. Not a single thing. Verse 18. Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, he knew that already, nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. He already knew that already. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Exactly as he said he was going to do. Exactly. He could have known. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Tomorrow this is it. Tomorrow you're going to be with me. You know, they can continue this conversation tomorrow, but it's not going to be, and it will be, this whole thing is an I told you so. This whole thing. And any conversation they may have had on the other side with Saul dying, ending up in Sheol from the Hebrew, or Hades in the Greek, they could have continued that conversation over there, and it would be a grand, see, that's exactly what God said he was going to do. You didn't change a thing. You did not change a thing. Saul is showing what type of person he is through and through, and God is not there. For a brief moment, it would seem like that Saul would be faithful. For a brief moment, it looked like the first 2 years, things seemed pretty good. But then it changes, and Saul is showing the type of man he is. And this is given for our learning. This is here for understanding how people can be, They can be told, you do this, here's the consequence for it. They do it, and they see the consequence. And with some, they can turn around. With others, they ignore it and go on. Just pretend that it didn't happen. Just pretend that it didn't happen. And the longer that goes on, the harder it is, and this is a scary thing, the harder it is to get out of that mess. The harder it is. Someone just making it into their lives, making it into their person. That is who they are. Doesn't justify a thing. That's who they made themselves into. And not turning back to God. What's going to happen is, there's going to be a huge battle. And Saul knows he has lost, and he wants to take his life. He doesn't want to be taken by the Philistines. He's going to take his own life. He's going to ask his armor bearer to do it, but the armor bearer will not do it. Therefore, Saul is going to do it himself. That's where, instead of prayer, instead of repentance, even at that last moment, instead of that, what does he do? He does precisely what Samuel said he was going to do. Tomorrow, you're going to be with me. Tomorrow, you're going to be on this side. And yes, he was. And that's a tragedy. That is the tragedy of Saul. But he's not the only tragic life that's been lived on this earth. It doesn't have to be like that at all. Simple humility, simple obedience, simply following the will of God. And God has done everything. Once again, you have that goodness, forbearance, and long-suffering, which continues to this day on us, calling us to repentance. And we ask this morning, if you need to respond to the invitation, if we can help you in any way, that you come as we stand and sing.